Good Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, behind closed doors, the January 6th committee giving the country a glimpse into what they say was happening inside the Trump White House during and after the Capitol riot. This includes outtakes from a video Trump recorded on January 7th, refusing to say the election was over.
I don't want to say the election's over. Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over.
The other key evidence the committee revealed, from lawmakers' escapes to Secret Service agents fearing for their lives. Positive test. President Biden is now isolating at the White House after testing positive for COVID. What we know about the president's symptoms and what this means for his agenda on issues like inflation over the next week. No mercy. Millions are not getting a break from the heat this morning. 98 million Americans are under a heat alert today. We're tracking when relief will be in sight and what these extreme temperatures are doing to the nation's food supply. Plus, low-key lifestyle. A lot of young Americans may not be going out this Friday night. Instead, they're choosing a night in, knitting, crocheting, maybe sewing. What's driving young adults to embrace their grandma era? That's something, of course, being driven by TikTok.
Of course.
You might have heard of coastal grandma.
It's also being driven by grandmas.
yeah, exactly.
Who exist.
Yeah. It's a fun segment and an interesting conversation, really, as people kind of shift some little things. We'll get to that later. We begin, though, this morning, of course, with last night's primetime January 6th hearing.
Yeah, the 8th hearing featured new witnesses and focused moment by moment on what the committee says former President Trump was doing and was not doing as his supporters attacked the Capitol. Representatives Adam Kinzinger and Elaine Luria led the hearing, presenting never-before-seen footage from that day and the day after. In one, we saw outtakes from a video the former president recorded where he refuses to say the election is over. We also heard from two former Trump staffers who described the scene inside the White House as the president watched the attack on TV and argued with staffers over whether to call off the mob. We have full coverage ahead this morning, but first we want to show you some of the major moments from this primetime hearing.
After the Secret Service refused to take President Trump to the Capitol, he returned to the White House. What you see on the screen is a photo of him inside the Oval Office immediately after he returned from the rally, still wearing his overcoat. A White House employee informed the president as soon as he returned to the Oval about the riot at the Capitol. Let me repeat that. Within 15 minutes of leaving the stage, President Trump knew that the Capitol was besieged and under attack. At 1:25, President Trump went to the private dining room off the Oval Office. From 1:25 until 4 o'clock, the president stayed in his dining room. So if President Trump wasn't calling law enforcement or military leaders, what did President Trump spend his time doing that afternoon while he first settled into the dining room? He was calling senators to encourage them to delay or object to the certification.
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth.
The president did not want to include any sort of mention of peace in that tweet, and that it took some convincing on their part, those who were in the room. And she said that there was a back and forth going over different phrases to find something that he was comfortable with. And it wasn't until Ivanka Trump suggested the phrase "stay peaceful" that he finally agreed to include it. I thought that January 6, 2021 was one of the darkest days in our nation's history, and President Trump was treating it as a celebratory occasion with that tweet. And so it just further cemented my decision to resign.
Whatever your politics, whatever you think about the outcome of the election, we as Americans must all agree on this. Donald Trump's conduct on January 6th was a supreme violation of his oath of office and a complete dereliction of his duty to our nation.
Let's bring in NBC News senior congressional reporter Scott Wong and former federal prosecutor and NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Scott, I'm going to start with you. The panel laid out a minute-by-minute account of former President Trump's actions and lack of action during the insurrection. What were the big takeaways?
Good morning. You know, I think we have to say one of the biggest takeaways was that Trump had so many opportunities during those 187 minutes that the attack was going on at the Capitol, that he easily, as the committee pointed out, could have walked over to the White House press briefing room and made remarks telling the rioters to stop attacking the Capitol, to go home. And that these rioters hung on his every word. They were literally inside the Capitol reading his tweets to one another, talking on radio transmissions about what the president was saying over Twitter. At one point, he said, you know, be nice to the Capitol Police. They're on our side. And they all shared that information with each other. And so at any moment, the president could have turned this all around, and yet he chose not to. We heard testimony from General Milley and so many others that the president never placed a phone call to the Pentagon during the attack, never placed a phone call to the Justice Department, to Homeland Security. Instead, he was calling his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, about delaying the electoral count. He was calling senators, Tommy Tuberville, you know, in the Capitol, saying, you know, how can we delay this process of counting the votes? And that was really one of the takeaways. Real quickly, just the sheer amount of evidence that we saw presented in this final of 8 hearings, from videos to depositions. You guys played. Let's, if we have this, can we play the clip of President Trump in the Rose Garden on January 7th? The outtakes of his speech, and this idea that he did not want to say anything negative about the rioters in that. In those outtakes, and that he did not want to say that the election was over.
To those who broke the law, you will pay. You do not represent our movement. You do not represent our country. And if you broke the law, you can't say that. I'm not going. I already said you will pay. But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
And so even in the wake of this horrific attack on the Capitol, he was still had his television producer hat on, producing these segments. They never made it out. They were never released to the public. We were seeing these for the first time. And so we are still poring over all of this material that the committee sort of unleashed on us last night. They are saying that you know, they are still investigating and that there will be more to come. But that was quite a hearing with a ton of new information, guys.
Yeah, and that clip right there was the outtakes from the day after the insurrection, the former president trying to record a message. Real quickly, Scott, how is the former president responding to last night's testimony?
Not well, as he has not responded well to previous hearings of the January 6th committee. He's lashing out at everyone on Truth Social, that's his social media site, including Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi, the select committee, which he calls the unselect committee. You know, the president is very frustrated by this entire process because he does not have any allies on the committee itself. If you remember, Kevin McCarthy yanked all of the Republican allies of President Trump off the committee after Nancy Pelosi blocked 2 of McCarthy's picks. We understand that President Trump had some role in that decision, or Trump World had some role in that decision. But now, in retrospect, it's looking like, you know, a really bad strategy, given that we are not hearing from any of Trump's allies during the course of these 8 committee hearings.
Glenn, let's bring you in here. From a legal standpoint, what stuck out to you most from these primetime hearings last night?
You know, Joe, it's the mountain of incriminating evidence that supports the conclusion that Donald Trump committed any number of crimes in his attempt to unlawfully retain the presidency. And as I watched last night's public hearings, I couldn't help but think about the Situation Room. People will probably know that is the room in the White House where the president and top executive branch officials will gather when there is an ongoing emergency, national emergency that needs to be monitored or addressed. People might remember the iconic photo of then President Obama, then Vice President Biden, and the top executive branch officials monitoring the raid that was designed to take out Osama bin Laden. And now we look at the picture that has been painted vividly of what Donald Trump did during our time of national crisis. He sat in a little presidential dining room watching the coverage of the Capitol attack on Fox TV and refused to call it off for more than 3 hours and refused to send law enforcement or military reinforcements to the Capitol to protect the lives of the people in the Capitol and to protect the peaceful transition of power. You know, Donald Trump during those 3+ hours was not the leader of the country. He was the leader of the coup.
Scott, this hearing last night was the last one for now, but we know the investigation's ongoing. We'll have more hearings in September. Real quickly, where does the committee go from here?
Well, they say they are continuing to interview individuals now in the month of July, in the months of July and August. They will now write their report. They are saying that they will release a preliminary report in September. I think that will be the bulk of the report, but they're leaving open, you know, the option that they could learn new additional information. That final report should come sometime in the fall and will be very comprehensive. And you know, they are saying, look, we can hold any number of hearings. Likely those hearings will be part of the release of the report. But at the same time, we could see another surprise hearing or two, like the one we saw in June with Cassidy Hutchinson and her bombshell testimony about President Trump, you know, adamant about wanting to go to the Capitol to join his supporters who were preparing to riot at the Capitol. So, you know, this is far from over. We are beginning to see a number of the court trials move forward in the case of Steve Bannon and others. And so there will be plenty to be watching for as we head into the fall.
The committee certainly has surprised us before, as you point out there. Scott Wong, Glenn Kirshner, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
Now, as the January 6th committee continues to investigate the attack on the Capitol, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General has launched a criminal investigation into those deleted text messages from the Secret Service. The Inspector General has asked the Secret Service to stop its own internal investigation into the matter while they investigate. Officials believe the messages could have more information about what occurred on January 6th. The House committee had this to say about this moving forward.
Recent disclosures have also caused the committee to subpoena yet further information from the Secret Service, which we've begun to receive and will continue to assess. The committee is also aware that certain Secret Service witnesses have now retained new private counsel. We anticipate further testimony under oath and other new information in the coming weeks.
NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now for more on this. Julia, good morning. So much to unpack here. First, just tell us what we know about this investigation so far and where it stands right now.
Well, we understand that it's a criminal investigation. We don't know exactly when it became criminal, but the Secret Service was informed by the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General on Wednesday night that they needed to freeze any actions they were taking internally to investigate the missing text messages because this investigation is now criminal. That, of course, is a little complicated for people at Secret Service because not only are they complying with the Inspector General, they're now complying with the National Archives and the January 6th committee, who are all looking into why these texts went missing. And so now we understand that they're kind of in a tough spot here, but that's where we are going forward. The Inspector General's office, they're really different across all agencies. I'll tell you a little bit about how DHS's work in that they do have a special investigations division that does have the authority to do criminal investigations, and then they would refer that to the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. Just because they're doing this investigation does not mean that there's evidence of wrongdoing. They're looking into that. And just because there could be evidence of wrongdoing and even a charge, that doesn't necessarily mean that the messages were deleted for a nefarious or intentional reason. It could just be simply that they violated the Federal Records Act. So let's put all of that in context. when we're talking about that it's criminal. But yes, we can now say, and we understand very well from our sources, that this investigation is now criminal.
Is there a possibility then for prosecution here?
Yeah, there definitely is. That would go to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They would review everything that the Inspector General had compiled, and they would make the decision on whether or not to prosecute, whether that is something that they would take against individuals or more largely. That remains to be seen. I'm completely hypothesizing because we're so far from that point. But yes, that's a possibility, and that's what makes us criminal.
So let's talk through all these different investigations. I mean, the Secret Service had, as I mentioned, been sort of investigating itself. They've been asked to stand down on that. Now we have this criminal investigation. And then, of course, in the background is the January 6th committee's investigation just in general about the attack on the Capitol. How does that fit with this?
So that fits in that there have been so many pieces of the January 6th hearing and the testimony that we've been able to see points back to Secret Service. And so the fact that there is now information that we're told we will never get from those text messages, that means that that could loom over this incident, this era, even longer past possibly the point that we get the report. There could be an ongoing criminal investigation that could last far past that as we try to find out what was missing and why it went missing and if it was intentionally deleted. It's because of all of these incidents that we've learned about, for example, why the vice president was asked to leave the building, what exactly happened when he said he was going to stay at the Capitol, the people who were close to the president who would understand his thinking, and of course, that incident that was so aptly described in detail, excruciating detail, by Cassidy Hutchinson about the president wanting to go to the Capitol. We learned more about that last night from a D.C. policeman. Now we're trying to understand what happened inside that car. Of course, we do understand now that some of the people inside that car, those agents have retained outside counsel, so perhaps they will now be testifying or being subpoenaed, and we could learn more from them. But yes, the text messages are key because you want the biggest picture you can when you're trying to put the pieces together of what happened that day. But I will note that Secret Service's sources tell me they don't often text, but we don't know what we can't see.
All right, Julia Ainsley, thank you so much.
We're getting some new reaction to the January 6 hearings this morning from voters all across the country. It's part of our County to County series. One of those locations is Duval County in Florida, which is home to the city of Jacksonville. That county has been a battleground in the past two presidential elections. In 2016, Mr. Trump won by 1 percentage point before President Biden won by 4 points in 2020. And it is projected to be another closely watched county for the midterms this November. Joining us now from Jacksonville is NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster. So, Shaq, let's talk about what voters are saying after watching all these hearings. We know the hearings are raising all kinds of legal questions, but there's a political issue here, too. So are the hearings having any impact on voters you're speaking with, how they feel about the former president and who they are going to support in the midterms?
Well, Joe, that is the big question, and we do have some new polling that gives us some insight into that answer. A new NPR Marist poll showing that most Americans are watching these hearings, and when they are asked who they put blame on for the January 6th insurrection, you have 6 in 10 Americans saying that President Trump shares a good or great deal of the blame, but most Americans are saying inflation is their top issue. And look, that's why we come to places like Jacksonville, Florida. This is a place we've been coming to month after month. During our first visit here last October, folks here told us that inflation was the top issue for them, and it seems like that is holding true. But one thing you also see in that poll is that Democrats are paying more attention to these hearings than Republicans, especially here. I want you to listen to a conversation I had with a voter here last night after last night's hearing. She's someone who has been watching nearly every single hearing. She says her friends text her after the hearings and they talk about it. They're watching this extremely closely. Listen to a little bit of what she said about the impact these hearings are having.
I don't think it fundamentally changed the way that I felt about it. It was just further solidifying the way I felt about them. That the seriousness of the whole attack, the seriousness of just riling these people up.
You see, based on what she told me, it has that impact of solidifying what she already believes. You know, one thing I asked her was what she wants to see come from these hearings, and she said she wants accountability. That's something that we also saw in the poll, where most Americans said that they do want President Trump to be charged with connection to January 6th, but only 25% of Americans, just over a quarter of Americans, saying that they believe he would be charged. That's how Democrats feel. When you talk to Republicans, it's a different story. Joe?
Shaq, briefly here, how does the GOP down in Duval County feel about their chances in the midterm elections? I mean, is the evidence laid out in these hearings changing their approach at all?
Look, they feel good about their chances, and it was going back to what we saw in that poll, that most Americans see inflation, see the rise in prices, those economic issues as their top voting issue. Talking to party leaders here, they say that this is something that gives them an in. This is a county that has gone back and forth, that Republicans have done well in the past, but in 2018 and 2020, Democrats did successful here. They won this county. Republicans believe they can continue that trend, or reverse that trend this cycle around because of those pocketbook issues. And talking with a Republican voter last night, he says that he was watching the hearings, he's been paying attention to it, but he feels that they're too scripted, that they don't give enough new information. And in his words, he says that it shows that the people on the panel were trying to blame Trump more than he deserved the blame for it. So you see those divides there, but this is going to come down to how folks in the middle feel. And it seems as if the January 6 hearings, at least based on polling, is having marginal impact on that. We'll see if that impact grows or shifts at all as we get closer to the midterm elections, Joe.
Shaq Brewster reporting from a swing county in Florida. Thanks, Shaq.
Now to the latest on President Biden. The White House announced yesterday that he tested positive for COVID. Officials say the president is double vaccinated and boosted and is now also receiving the antiviral treatment Paxlovid. The president posted this video later in the day after the White House made the announcement.
Hey folks, guess you heard this morning I tested positive for COVID, but I've been double vaccinated, double boosted. Symptoms are mild, and I really appreciate your inquiries and your concerns. But I'm doing well. I'm getting a lot of work done. I'm going to continue to get it done, and in the meantime, thanks for your concern and keep the faith. It's going to be okay.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett and NBC News medical contributor Dr. Uche Blackstock. Good morning to the both of you. Maura, I'll begin with you. Just tell us the latest on the president's condition and you know, also the significance of him posting that video kind of showing I'm okay.
Good morning, Savannah. Today is day one, first full day of isolation for President Biden after testing positive yesterday. We haven't received any new updates about his health today, but the White House had said that he has a runny nose, dry cough, and didn't sleep well overnight yesterday. And so we do expect to hear an update from the White House on his health. As they said, they will be providing a statement regarding any updates each day going forward. And so right now the White House is focused on the fact that they say President Biden has mild symptoms, that he's getting that antiviral treatment, and they're positive about his recovery. They're also identifying, we know now that the First Lady and the Vice President, as well as the President's Chief of Staff, are all close contacts, but they have tested negative. And so we're waiting to hear more around what it looks like for the White House campus. But in terms of posting that video and the photo that the President posted on Twitter just hours before the video, is that they're sending the message, like you said, he's okay, he's continuing to work. They wanted to show, Karine Jean-Pierre said in the press briefing yesterday, they wanted to show him masked off to show that he's interacting with people, he's working, and that he's looking and feeling okay. Obviously, there was some confusion about why he wasn't wearing a mask. Dr. Jha, the COVID coordinator, said that that is the guidance they would project for most Americans, but that the photo and the video were taken safely. As for the president today, he does have meetings on his schedule with his senior advisors about American gas prices and legislative agenda. Those meetings will all be done virtually today, though, Savannah.
Dr. Blackstock, let's bring you in here. So the biggest concern, of course, is the president's age. He's 79 years old. He says he's just experiencing mild symptoms, but that is one of the biggest concerns here with COVID is their age. Tell us any risks here.
Right, Savannah. We've seen that people over 80 with COVID, even if vaccinated and boosted, could potentially do quite poorly. And so what we're looking out for is if he starts complaining of increased fatigue, shortness of breath, worsening cough, that could signify a pneumonia. We know that if COVID progresses, it could cause kidney problems in the brain, and inflammation in the blood vessels that could lead to clots. So I know that his physicians are going to take a really good care of him. And it's great that he was able to start Paxlovid within a few days.
Maura, now you just mentioned that the president is continuing to work. That's kind of part of the point of that video and that photo. But, you know, obviously there's never really a great time to get COVID. This really, though, isn't a great time for the president to be sick. His approval rating is down at 36%. On the economy, that's fallen to 30%. That's in a new CNBC poll, and those are actually both all-time lows for CNBC polling. We're heading into midterms. How might this diagnosis impact the White House's push?
This is definitely not good timing for the White House, Savannah. One person close to the White House telling NBC that there's this idea that there's more of an annoyance than being worried about the president's condition right now because he's having these mild symptoms, but also because the White House has emphasized that this is crunch time. They were planning on getting the president on the road, especially after coming back from the foreign trip in the Middle East that had all that controversy. They're wanting the president to push his economic agenda and be on the road with other candidates leading up to the midterms to project strength to the Democratic Party. He was supposed to travel to Pennsylvania just yesterday at an event in Florida. Obviously, that's not happening. The White House saying that they will not have him be traveling again until he tests negative following that 5 days of isolation.
Before I let you both go, Dr. Blackstock, quickly, I did mention the president taking Paxlovid. Just tell us a little bit about that and how it's going to help him fight COVID.
Right. So Paxlovid it essentially prevents the virus from replicating, and it decreases the course of symptoms. And so we're hoping that the president will respond very well to that. You know, in studies, Paxlovid has been shown to decrease the risk of hospitalization and death by 90%. So it's our most effective therapeutic out there. He'll be taking it for 5 days, twice a day. And one thing to be aware of is that sometimes people can have rebound symptoms after they complete that course. So I know that his physicians will be keeping an eye out for that in the coming days.
All right. Maura Barra and Dr. Uche Blackstock, thank you both so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.